Hey everyone, welcome back to Mimi Leaks. If you're new here, please make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can stay informed on the latest updates. Today we're diving into a deeply troubling legal case. The lawsuit brought by 5 persons against WWE, Vince McMahon, Linda McMahon, and TKO Holdings. The allegations are serious, including inappropriate, intimate relationships, abuse, and trafficking of minors, specifically of underage boys. Collectively known in the WWE community as Ringboys, the children were hired by the organization's ringside announcer and ring crew chief, Melvin Phillips Jr., to assist in preparation for WWE's wrestling shows. They were then allegedly groomed, exploited, and abused by Phillips. On behalf of the plaintiffs, their attorneys state that they only recently learned of the depth of knowledge that the McMahons and the WWE had about what happened to them. This information, along with recent changes in related laws, has allowed them to pursue justice via this lawsuit. Vince McMahon, the longtime chairman and CEO of WWE, has been a prominent figure in the wrestling world for decades, shaping it into a global phenomenon. Linda McMahon, his wife, served as CEO of WWE as well, and later served as the 25th administrator of the Small Business Administration from 2017 to 2019. Together, the McMahons have been influential in the entertainment industry, but now face serious allegations that could redefine their legacies. TKO Holdings, as a named defendant, formed from the merger of WWE and UFC, and further complicates this case, as it raises questions about corporate responsibility and the protection of individuals within these organizations, especially vulnerable individuals. Before we dive in, I want to give you a quick trigger warning. Today's topic involves serious allegations, including inappropriate relationships, intimate relationships, and abuse, as well as the trafficking of underage boys, in pursuit of the above claims. So with that, let's get started on the complaint in this civil case. In the Circuit Court for Baltimore County, Maryland, John Doe's 1 through 5 plaintiffs versus World Wrestling Entertainment, LLC, Vincent McMahon, Linda McMahon, and TKO Group Holdings, Inc. Complaint and demand for jury trial. And here's some quotes. And these are Vince McMahon, WWE executives. Okay, quoting. When you're on the fast track, you just didn't think about the other people who were being hurt. And as far as the abuse of the Ringboys, and it was just generally known by everybody that it was going on. It was a mess. It was an absolute mess. The McMahons clearly knew what was going on, but did nothing to stop it. And I wish I could tell you the real stories. Holy shit. Introduction. During the 1970s, 80s, and early 90s, Melvin Phillips Jr., aka Mel Phillips, Phillips hereafter, worked for World Wrestling Entertainment, LLC, WWE, as its prominent ringside announcer and ring crew chief. Using his public and highly visible positions in an industry thriving on young adults for fandom, Phillips hired underage boys, often as young as 12 and 13 years old, to assist with the ring crew with errands and other tasks in preparation for WWE's wrestling shows. Phillips' recruits were known within as the Ringboys. Phillips' real motivation in luring the Ringboys with the promise of gaining access to the popular WWE events was to sexually abuse them. And Vince McMahon knew it, admitting that he was aware, at least as early as 1980s, that Phillips had a peculiar and unnatural interest in young boys. But Mr. McMahon has never denied making that admission, despite countless instances over the last 4 decades where, if it were untrue, he would stridently have denied it. He didn't because it is true. Defendants knowingly gave Phillips free rein to use his highly public WWE personality and his image to entice local kids from the area, near the WWE shows to help set up and take down the wrestling ring. Phillips lured and manipulated the young boys with promises of meeting famous wrestlers and attending the highly popular wrestling shows, experiences that were otherwise unattainable for these kids. Like many pedophiles, Phillips targeted young boys from broken homes and even routinely traveled with them in plain sight, staying together in hotel rooms and driving in his car to WWE events across the Northeast Corridor. Defendants knowingly allowed Phillips to exploit his position at WWE to groom and abuse ring boys, even in plain sight of wrestlers and executives in the locker area. At some venues, defendants even provided Phillips with his own private dressing room, where he would use his own expensive video camera, extremely rare at this time, to film his escapades with the children. This action is brought about by survivors of abuse committed by Phillips, who groomed, exploited, and abused underage ring boys. While 5 of these survivors have initially come forward, there are undoubtedly countless others who still suffer in silence. This lawsuit is the tip of the iceberg. More revelations will certainly follow in the coming months. New York Post reporter Phil Mushnick stated in a recently released Netflix docuseries called Mr. McMahon that Phillips and other WWE executives in the McMahon's inner circle were part of the pedophile ring. After writing about the WWE years ago, Mushnick's mailbox became stuffed with messages that are all essentially read the same. Quote, "You don't know the half of it. You don't know how bad it is within the ring and within the locker rooms." Unquote. Mushnick said he returned some phone calls and it was mind-blowing. Phillips' abuse came to the attention of the FBI, who had received a videotape that was shot by a WWE employee and was in the possession of WWE well before it was ever sent to the FBI, who documented at least 10 ring boy victims. On 8/3 of '93, the U.S. Attorney's Office acquired the half-inch videotape entitled Redacted, in which is believed to show Phillips' unusual foot fetish. For information of BSU to date, the NY investigation has identified 10 victims of Phillips. A review of the tape by the NYO shows Phillips lying with redacted foot in a private area for extended periods of time. All victims have stated that Phillips plays with their feet for extended periods of time between half an hour to 2 hours in duration. New York has subpoenaed Phillips to the grand jury but was told by prosecutors he will take the fifth. New York would like to indict Phillips on the abuse charges if the video is consistent with the BSU's abuse guidelines. In addition to the federal government's explicit knowledge, it was common knowledge in the WWE among the ring crew, wrestlers, and executives that Phillips surrounded himself with a posse of underage ring boys, including when he traveled across state lines and stayed in hotel rooms with the children. It was also well known throughout the WWE that Phillips had fetishes for young boys, namely, and only partially, because Phillips didn't try to hide his recruiting and cavorting with underage boys, including exhibiting his foot fetish for young boys in front of WWE personnel. It was there for WWE and its leaders to see in plain sight, yet no one did anything to stop Phillips' rampant and open abuse of young boys. The widespread knowledge of the abuse was confirmed by a former high-level WWE executive who said the following: "The boys that the company hired to put up in the ring and so forth were being abused, by some folks who were in the wrestling operations side of things. And it was just generally known by everybody that it was going on. It was a mess. It was an absolute mess. The McMahons clearly knew what was going on, but really did nothing to stop it. There was not a damn thing we could do about it." Below is a photo taken by Phillips of the 3 ring boys near the ring at the WWE event, showing the allure of Phillips' position and, therefore, his ability to groom and entice young, vulnerable fans of wrestling for his own gratification. Defendants Vincent McMahon, Vince or Mr. McMahon, and Linda McMahon, collectively known as the McMahons, knew, at least as early as the early to mid-1980s, that Phillips had, as McMahon had stated, a peculiar and unnatural interest in young boys. Defendants' admission of knowledge predated Phillips' abuse of the plaintiffs in this case. In 1988, the McMahons fired Phillips after even more allegations were made about him abusing children. But, inexplicably, 6 weeks later, the McMahons rehired Phillips as he went back to recruiting young boys to exploit them. The McMahons rehired Phillips on the condition that he steer clear of kids. He did not, and they clearly knew it. But perhaps even more troubling, the McMahons concealed the reason for Phillips' absence and his firing. By rehiring him, defendants allowed Phillips to continue abusing innocent kids. In 1992, New York Post reporter Phil Mushnick wrote a series of columns about the abuse of the Ringboys. After the McMahons tried to silence Mushnick with a bogus defamation lawsuit, Mushnick testified under oath that Vince told him that he saw Phillips with these young kids all the time. Vince never denied it was true. Mushnick's article led to the impaneling of a grand jury. On July 15, 1992, the Miami Herald broke the story of the federal investigation into the WWE. It's on the page and it reads, WWF under federal investigation. From the Miami Herald, 7/15/1992. The FBI Behavioral Science Unit report noted that Phillips' abuse was widespread, confirming at the time 10 victims of Mel Phillips. The FBI also noted that Phillips' abuse and foot fetish with underage boys was consistent with other pedophiles. Reading from that, it says, subject Mel Phillips has a preference for young adolescent boys, which focuses around a strong foot fetish. His recruitment, seduction, and manipulation of these boys is consistent with the behavior of hundreds of boy-lover pedophiles studied by the BSSU. His focus on the feet and his apparent lack of more overt acts, is less common. And it's on the screen, but it further reads, to summarize, that the material furnished does not provide conclusive evidence, as it was taken in a public setting without the obvious intimate activity, and also the most problematic fact is that there were no victims furnished. Defendants had specific knowledge regarding Phillips' deviant behavior with children, including his foot fetish. Linda McMahon even admitted in a 1993 television interview that Phillips had a foot fetish and that it had become a running joke in the WWE, but then claimed that it was being blown out of proportion. But the McMahons knew it was no joke and that it had not been blown out of proportion because at least one 16-year-old boy had already complained to them. Below is a photo of that young boy standing ringside in front of the railing and even touching the ring. The WWE reached a financial settlement with the young boy pictured above, but it sets off a series of events between him and the WWE that eventually led to his death by unaliving himself in 2021 when he could no longer deal with the damage done to him by the McMahons, the WWE, Phillips, and others. He implored his brother to tell the story, and his last known words were, quote, "Remember to tell them, the WWE and the McMahons, what they did to me," unquote. Defendants allowed Phillips and others to engage in and foster the WWE's rampant culture of abuse. The perverse culture goes back to the organization's early days and has continued in recent times, as exemplified in the recently unearthed series of alleged misconduct committed by Vince McMahon himself, the longtime kingpin and domineering influence over the WWE. After decades of suffering in silence from their childhood trauma, these survivors come forward now to hold defendants accountable for their conduct in allowing the systemic and pervasive abuse by Phillips. Through investigation, the filing of Grant versus WWE and others, the acquisition of the WWE by the TKO, and the ouster of Vince McMahon as CEO, plaintiffs have learned the depth of knowledge that the McMahons and the WWE had about what happened to them and that the abuse in the company started at the top with the McMahons. This case will bring the light to truth about the systemic, insidious, and life-altering abuse. 2. Statement of facts. A. Defendants knew about Mel Phillips' abuse of the Ringboys. The WWE and McMahons knew about Phillips' abuse of Ringboys, but did not take any measures to prevent it or to protect the young boys. Instead, for years, they knowingly allowed Phillips to use and allure the stature of being associated with the WWE to lure, recruit, groom, and abuse numerous underage boys. Phillips' essays occurred not only at the wrestling events, but also in hotel rooms and other places where he would shuttle boys in plain sight. Phillips would get completely naked and require the young boys to do so as well, for extended periods of time, including throughout the night when they would be coerced to share a bed with Phillips. Phillips would sometimes videotape the assaults. After the Ringboys scandal became public in 1992, the WWE was under investigation by the federal government on allegations of abuse of minors and the illegal transportation of minors across state lines, with investigators focusing on Phillips, Pat Patterson, and Terry Garvin. The latter two were high-level WWE executives and trusted lieutenants of the McMahons. Despite the FBI's acquisition of videotape evidence as referenced above of Phillips' actions and its conclusions regarding Phillips' inappropriate proclivities of young boys, charges were not brought primarily because no alleged victims were willing to admit to or describe the nature of their activities with Phillips. Fear, shame, and the McMahons' strong-arm tactics and legal machinery were overwhelming, keeping the strongest Ringboys silent for decades. The WWE and McMahons knew about, tolerated, and at least tacitly and arguably expressly approved of the culture of misconduct, particularly via the actions of WWE executives and McMahon himself. Misconduct permeated the organization from the top down and infected the organization to its rotten core. The rampant abuse is exemplified by a myriad of allegations that have since been made in public about WWE's looming kingpin, Vince McMahon, and other top executives, including those detailed in a trafficking lawsuit by former WWE employee Janelle Grant. Side note, I think that one was filed January of this year. Okay. The serious nature of the misconduct was also disclosed in corporate annual reports for defendant TKO Group Holdings, Inc., which now owns and operates the WWE. Allegation of the Ringboy abuse was first publicly revealed in 1992 by a pair of Ringboys, Tom Cole and Chris Loss, in what became known as the Ringboy scandal. Accusations of abuse were specifically made against Phillips and two other WWE executives, Terry Garvin, aka Terry Joyle, a VP of operations and Phillips' supervisor, and Pat Patterson, who was often known as Vince McMahon's right-hand man and close confidant. The accusations led to Phillips and Garvin leaving WWE and Patterson resigning, only to quickly return. Following a review of hundreds of pages of court records, Freedom of Information Act requests, and more than half a dozen interviews, Business Insider reported that the McMahons, while publicly expressing shock and concern over the Ringboy scandal allegations, actually knew and tolerated the abuse for years. "It's a crazy time in the company," said one former high-level employee. He revealed that, quote, "the boys that the company hired to put it up in the ring and so forth were being abused by some folks who were in the wrestling operations side of things. And it was just generally known. Everybody knew that it was going on. It was a mess. It was an absolute mess," unquote. He continued, his voice breaking a bit. The employee further stated that the McMahons clearly knew what was going on, but really did nothing to stop it. There was not a damn thing we could do about it. In the book, S, Lies, and Headlocks, The Real Story of Vince McMahon and the WWE, the authors present that Nelson Sweglar, then the WWE's operations manager, remembers walking into a bus and seeing Garvin, whom he found likable, hard at it with a ring boy. Good God. Swegler was quoted as follows regarding the Ringboys' abuse, quote, "Everyone knew it was going on, but it would have taken someone within the Brotherhood to have moved on it, and none of the people who knew about it moved on it," unquote. The book also recounts Mel Phillips carrying around the country a black book with the names of kids he would call when the WWE came to town, noting that the kids were usually from broken homes. In a 1992 investigation into the Ringboy scandal, a magazine reported that Phillips was spotted once in the backseat of a car in Pennsylvania performing an act on an 11-year-old boy. Former top WWE star Bruno Sammartino told the magazine, quote, "Vince McMahon was told about the incident and he was electing not to do anything," unquote. The book also recounts Mel Phillips carrying around the country a black book with the names of kids who he would call when the WWE came to town, noting that the kids were usually from broken homes. In a 1992 investigation into the Ringboy scandal, a magazine reported that Phillips was once spotted in the backseat of a car in Pennsylvania performing an act on an 11-year-old boy. Former top WWE star Bruno Sammartino told the magazine, quote, "Vince McMahon was told about the incident and he elected not to do anything," unquote. Sammartino would also publicly state that the same events happened when he appeared on a 1992 taping of CNN's Larry King Live, describing harassment and abuse as a common knowledge throughout the professional wrestling industry, particularly that everybody knew Phillips had abused little boys. Additional details of that incident were revealed during a 1992 taping of The Phil Donahue Show, when wrestling icon, superstar Billy Graham, said that he was present the night in Allentown, Pennsylvania, in 82 or 83, when Phillips was spotted in a car with a child about 10 to 11 years old, performing intimate acts on him. Superstar Billy Graham said that the security guard brought the child into the arena and presented him to Vince McMahon and McMahon's father. Vince and his father responded that they would handle it, and they did not. Graham said, "This has gone on for so many years," and suggested that Vince McMahon knew of and ignored the abuse. The magazine article noted above added that Phillips was briefly suspended in the WWE several years later for that same act, demonstrating further that the McMahons knew about Phillips' abuse before Phillips was temporarily terminated in 1988. And more specifically, Vince McMahon confessed to the New York Post columnist Mushnick that he and Linda knew of Phillips' peculiar and unnatural interest in boys for years before they temporarily fired him for it in 1988. Despite that knowledge, the McMahons knowingly put dozens of young boys in imminent harm's way by rehiring Phillips just weeks later with the caveat that Phillips was to steer clear from kids. Mushnick wrote about the confession in a 1992 column. Quote, "2 weeks ago, during pour his heart out phone calls, Vince McMahon told West Coast-based journalist Dave Meltzer, then me, that he had let Phillips go 4 years ago because Phillips' relationship with kids seemed peculiar and unnatural. McMahon said he rehired Phillips with the caveat that Phillips steer clear from kids," unquote. Meltzer confirmed to Business Insider that this was an accurate account of his call with Vince McMahon. During his interview in the Mr. McMahon Netflix docuseries, Meltzer also recounted talking to Mr. McMahon around the time that Phillips, Garvin, and Patterson left WWE, and Mr. McMahon tried to claim that only one of the three was innocent, Patterson. When Meltzer pressed McMahon on why Patterson was gone if he was supposedly innocent, McMahon accused Meltzer of not understanding how to run the WWE's business. Like Mr. McMahon, WWE's executive director Bruce Pritchard tried to defend Patterson during his interview for the Mr. McMahon's docuseries. But regarding Phillips and Garvin, he merely said no comment. Below is a photo of Phillips taken by one of the John Does. And it shows him in a tuxedo, and then another guy holding tickets. About a year later, on or about February 17, 1993, WWE and McMahon brought a shame defamation lawsuit against Mushnick and the Post. In his sworn deposition testimony, Mushnick described what he said were the detailed conversations with Vince McMahon, where Vince acknowledged that he and Linda had known for some time that Mel had a peculiar and unnatural interest and attachment to children, and as we saw him going around and with kids, that Linda and him decided that it was wrong and had fired him for it, only to let Phillips return to WWE out of pity. In addition to all of the facts showing the in-depth knowledge of the McMahons regarding Phillips' pedophilia and fetishes, the below-pictured letter provides that the McMahons and their longtime attorney were in receipt of the videotape noted in the FBI in the year prior to suing Mushnick. And it's on letterhead by Kirkpatrick and Lockhart, and it is to Mr. Maloof. I am returning you the videotape of your film of the WWF events that you were kind enough to provide to us last year. On behalf of Titan, I thank you for sharing these with us. Should we have any need for the videotapes in the future, I will be in touch. With continued best regards, I remain yours truly, Jerry McDevitt. Below are 3 pictures of Phillips visiting a neighborhood filled with children, using WWF props and gear to lure children to him. In the first photo, Phillips' arms and a portion of his legs can be seen in the bottom left, surrounded by children, including one former ring boy, who's now deceased, holding the Iron Sheik's famous Persian clubs. In the second photo, another ring boy is shown holding WWE Championship belt in Phillips' car at a gas station while on a road trip with Phillips. Phillips would keep the WWE props and paraphernalia in the back of his car. In the third photo, 2 of the underage boys posed with the same belt, simulating a wrestling move, where one of the boys was smashing the other over the head with the belt. There's the photos. He told me that he was returned by Linda, Mushnick testified, saying Vince and Linda returned Phillips to the organization with the caveat that Mel steer clear of underage boys, stop hanging out with kids, and stop chasing the kids. Mushnick testified that Vince McMahon said to him that he had brought him back because Phillips really missed the wrestling and really missed the scene. Mushnick further testified that Vince McMahon told him he saw Phillips with these kids all the time. In his deposition, Mushnick testified that he had talked to Vince about other rumored victims of abuse within WWE beyond the 2 ring boys who went public in 1992. He recalled mentioning a specific name to Vince, a teen boy Mushnick said was referred to him within the WWE as Mrs. Mel Phillips. As Mushnick remembered it, Vince responded, quote, "That's Phillips' guy, but he has his parents' permission to be with Mel," unquote. Mushnick also testified as follows regarding his conversation with Vince McMahon regarding the obvious red flags associated with Phillips transporting a child from upstate New York to Baltimore. And it is on the screen right now if you care to pause and read what it says. Continuing, in the Mr. McMahon docuseries, Mushnick describes Phillips as a ring boss who would bring with him ring boys who were often underage and being abused. Mushnick also noted that he learned Phillips, Garvin, and Patterson were in the pedophile ring. Mushnick added, quote, "These were real kids being abused on Mr. McMahon's watch. I think Vince is guilty of aiding and abetting the ring boy scandal. At best, he's guilty of rank neglect," unquote. Business Insider reported that Vince McMahon's acknowledgement, as described by Mushnick, said that he and Linda fired but then rehired Phillips in '88. This is further supported by video evidence as Phillips disappeared from his post on the syndicated Wrestling Challenge TV show after a March '88 taping, but reemerged for a live broadcast merely 6 weeks later at Boston Garden. Business Insider reported that WWE never publicly acknowledged his absence at the time, but Phillips' former friend, who spoke with the Insider, added that Phillips never mentioned the 1998 firing until the McMahons dismissed him again in 1992. On information and belief, when Phillips was fired in 1992, Vince McMahon told him to go quietly so the Ringboy scandal would blow over. The WWE and/or the McMahons also gave Phillips a lump sum payment of around $300,000. Vince's confession to the McMahons' knowledge of Phillips' misconduct was corroborated by former high-level WWE employee who told Business Insider that it was generally known by everybody that abuse of the Ringboys was occurring, and that the source suspected that the McMahons clearly knew what was going on, but really did nothing to stop it. In addition to the high-level executives, multiple WWE wrestlers knew about Mel Phillips' abuse of the Ringboys. Okay, y'all, that's where I'll be ending things for today. I will continue with this complaint sometime in the very near future. For now, thanks so much for watching. If you found this informative, then please don't forget to like the video and hit that subscribe button, and tap the notification bell so you never miss an update. Feel free to check out these other videos too, and I'll catch you on the next one.